The rain hadn't stopped for hours. Heavy, cold sheets of water slammed against the cracked sidewalks of Ashton Hollow, a sleepy little town tucked between the mountains and miles of empty farmland. Most people stayed inside that morning, doors, bolted heaters humming, but Lena Whitmore, in her usual stubbornness, had laced up her sneakers and gone for a jog. It was her way of coping. Her divorce had been finalized just 2 weeks earlier. Her new rental smelled like mildew and regret, and if she didn't get out into the air every morning, the thoughts got too loud. She ran the same route every time, a trail that curved along the riverbed, under the old rusted bridge where teenagers once spray-painted bad poetry and dated initials. But on this particular morning, just as she turned past a grove of leafless trees, Lena skidded to a halt. At first she thought it was a pile of trash. Then she saw movement. A child, no more than 2 years old, sat hunched in the muddy ditch. His small body was trembling violently, soaked through barefoot. His face was pale, lips blue, arms wrapped around something large beside him. That something turned its head, and Lena's breath caught. A dog. Big. Maybe a shepherd mix. Its fur was slick and matted with mud, one eye slightly swollen shut. But it was alert, curled tight beside the child, its body acting like a barrier against the cold wind. When Lena stepped closer, it let out a warning growl. "Oh my God," she whispered, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. The 911 dispatcher answered immediately. "911, what's your emergency? There's a kid, a baby, in the ditch by the river trail. He's soaked, freezing, and there's a dog with him, a stray, I think. It won't let me near him. How old is the child?" "Maybe 2. He's not talking. Please hurry. Officers and paramedics are on the way. Stay with them, but don't approach. Keep talking to me." Lena knelt a few feet away, slowly lowering her hood. "Hey there," she murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you, okay? You're safe now." The dog didn't move. Its eyes stayed locked on hers. Protective. The child looked up, eyes glassy, too cold to cry. Rain continued to fall as the sound of sirens approached. Lena waved down the first responder, a young EMT who approached carefully with a silver thermal blanket. 2 others flanked him, one with a tranquilizer dart prepared for the dog. "Don't shoot him," Lena said quickly. "He's not attacking." "We're not going to harm him, Mom," the officer assured, "but we need to move the child safely." It happened fast. The dart struck, and within seconds the dog wobbled, then collapsed gently against the child. The EMT scooped up the boy now, limp but breathing, wrapping him tightly. The boy whimpered as the dog's body was pulled away from him. "I think he was keeping that baby alive," Lena muttered to herself. The officers loaded the dog into the back of an animal control van. Even unconscious, his massive body, still, seemed to shield an invisible danger from reaching the boy. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens echoing, Lena stood in the mud, staring after it. The rain had soaked her to the bone, but she barely noticed. Something about the whole thing didn't feel random. A toddler abandoned in a ditch, in the middle of nowhere, with a dog standing guard. It wasn't just strange. It was impossible. She didn't know why, but she had a gnawing sense in her gut. This was only the beginning. And that dog? That dog wasn't just a stray. In the emergency room of Ashton County General Hospital, Dr. Meredith Cho examined the toddler with the practiced calm of someone who had seen nearly everything: burn victims, car crash survivors, overdose cases. But nothing had prepared her for this boy. He was silent. Not from stubbornness or defiance. This was different. This was shock. "Blood pressure's low, body temps still dropping," a nurse called out as they worked around him. "Get a warming unit. Start fluids, notify PEDS ICU," Dr. Cho said. The boy didn't even flinch when the IV slid into his tiny arm. They had no name, no birth date, no medical history. He had nothing but a soaked blue t-shirt, bruises on his ribs, and the image of that dog burned into his memory. When shown photos of animals to comfort him, he pointed weakly at a German shepherd image and wouldn't let it go. The nurses started calling him Noah, a name pulled from a children's book in the waiting room. Across town, Detective Marco Yates was hitting a wall. Yates was good at his job. 10 years in Ashton PD with 4 more in Chicago homicide before that. But in all his experience, A missing child usually came with a frantic parent. Not this time. "I need you to check again," he barked into his phone, pacing his office. "No one's reported a missing toddler. No Amber Alerts, nothing matching his description." The answer was always the same. No one had reported a child missing in Ashton or in any of the 6 surrounding counties. Noah didn't exist. Later that afternoon, Yates visited the Ashton County Animal Shelter, where the dog, now nicknamed Shadow, was being held. The shelter was noisy, crowded with barking, but Shadow didn't react to any of it. He lay on a cot in the corner of a kennel, bandaged along his ribs, barely moving. His eyes flicked open when Yates approached. A volunteer named Diane, in her 60s and soft-spoken, met the detective outside the kennel. "He hasn't eaten since he got here," she said, frowning. "Won't take treats, barely drinks. Only time he responded to anything was when I said something in German." Yates raised an eyebrow. "German?" She nodded. "I said sits to another dog. This one, Shadow, sat immediately. Then looked at me like I'd called his name." Yates leaned closer to the cage. "You think he's trained?" "I don't think, I know," Diane said. "This dog's no stray. Look at how he moves, calm, focused. Even with his injuries, he's alert. He's been through training." Yates made a note. "Military or police canine, maybe?" "If he is," Diane added, "someone either abandoned him or lost him. And from the way he stayed with that child, I don't think he was lost." At the hospital, Noah was slowly stabilizing, but his silence remained. He didn't speak, didn't cry. He flinched when anyone reached too quickly, especially if they were male. A child psychologist was called in. "This isn't ordinary silence," she told Dr. Cho. "It's protective. Whatever happened to him, it didn't just scare him. It rewired how he trusts." Back at the precinct, Yates called in a favor to a contact in military records. He submitted Shadow's photo, markings, and the guess that the dog might have once worn a tactical harness. By midnight, an answer came back. Possible. Matched to Atlas, Army K-9, declared missing in action during a transport convoy ambush last year. Status presumed dead. Yates stared at the report. Missing in action? What the hell was a military-trained search dog doing with a toddler in a muddy ditch in small-town Ashton? And why, after 24 hours, was no one coming forward for the child? He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Something was deeply wrong, and they were only scratching the surface. Detective Marco Yates didn't believe in coincidences, not when it came to children, and certainly not when it involved a military-trained dog with a bullet scar and a toddler who shouldn't exist. "Atlas," he muttered, reading the army. Report again. The document confirmed it. The dog found beside the boy wasn't just any dog. He had been assigned to a U.S. Army search and rescue unit, disappeared during a classified transport operation near the Texas border 11 months ago. His handler had been killed in the ambush. The rest of the team presumed Atlas had died in the crossfire or escaped into the wild. No trace of him was ever found until now, but that still didn't explain the boy. Who was Noah? And what had happened before Lena Whitmore found them huddled in that muddy ditch? Yates needed more answers. The next day, Yates met with Lena at a small cafe off Main Street. She sat with a steaming cup of tea, hair pulled back, eyes tired. "Tell me everything again," he said, pulling out his notebook. "I was running," she began, "just like every morning. It was pouring, I almost didn't go out. You said the child didn't cry, didn't move, nothing, just held onto that dog like it was his only lifeline." Yates nodded. "You noticed anything else? Anything strange around the area?" She hesitated. "There was a scent. Burnt plastic or rubber, maybe. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Figured it was runoff from the road. But the dog..." So I can't stop thinking about his eyes. He didn't look wild. He looked trained, like he was guarding that kid. After taking down her full statement, Yates drove straight to the county records office, where he pulled recent land usage permits and incident reports. One caught his attention. A 911 call from a farmer 2 nights earlier, reporting gunshots in the woods north of town, near an old hunting cabin off Barrow Ridge Road. The call hadn't been followed up. Weather delays and dispatch shortages had buried it. By the afternoon, Yates was in his cruiser, tires spinning through gravel as he wound up the muddy trail toward the abandoned property. 2 officers followed behind in a second vehicle. The cabin sat sunken into the trees, its roof slanted and caved in on one side. Moss blanketed the wood like moldy skin. The place reeked of mildew and soot. The back door hung half open. Yates entered first, gun drawn. The inside was trashed. Mattresses overturned, a few old plastic crates, empty food cans, and something that stopped him cold. A child's sock. Blue. Tiny. Still damp. He moved into the next room. His flashlight passed over something wedged under a broken table, a blood-stained baby blanket, ripped down the middle. Another officer called out, "Detective, over here!" Yates hurried into the hallway, where a scorched duffel bag lay open. Inside it was a shredded tactical dog harness, tag still attached, the name Atlas. This was their hideout, Yates muttered. Someone was keeping that kid here. And the dog, the officer added grimly. "What happened that night?" Yates said aloud. "Why'd they run? Who were they running from?" Back at the shelter, Diane sat beside Atlas, still recovering, still quiet. He lifted his head as if sensing something. A low growl rumbled from his chest. His ears twitched. His body stiffened. He knew something. And miles away, in a motel room just off the interstate, a man watched the local news from the edge of a stained bed. The report showed Lena's photo. Then the dog. Then the boy. The man didn't move. He slowly folded the newspaper on his lap. His knuckles were bruised. His hands were trembling, not from fear but fury. They weren't supposed to make it out, he said under his breath. He reached for a duffel bag under the bed. Inside, among ammunition and maps, was a crumpled photo of Noah. At the hospital, Noah lay curled beneath the warmed sheets of his hospital bed, eyes wide open, unmoving. Despite the gentle voices of the nurses and the quiet cartoons playing on the small TV, the boy hadn't uttered a single word since he was found. He stared only at the photo they'd printed of Shadow, now officially confirmed as Atlas. Dr. Meredith. Cho entered the room quietly with a specialist. Dr. Mallory Reeds, a trauma psychologist, flown in from the state's Child Services Division. She approached the bed slowly, kneeling to the boy's level. "Noah," she said gently. "Can I show you something?" She pulled a plush toy dog from her bag, gray, floppy ears, wearing a blue vest just like Atlas's uniform. Noah's fingers twitched. "You're safe now," Mallory continued. "We're going to take care of you, but we need to know where you came from. Do you remember your name?" The boy looked up, just slightly, eyes glassy. A breath caught in his throat. Then, barely audible, he whispered, "Luca." Mallory's hand stilled. She turned to Dr. Cho. "He said Luca. That's not a name we've used here." Dr. Cho's brows furrowed. "It's something. We'll run it." At the precinct, Yates was already one step ahead. Back from the cabin, he'd sent evidence to forensics and began searching missing persons under the name Luca, filtering for age, region, anything. A half hour in, he froze. Luca Thorne. Age: 2 years and 7 months, reported missing from Fayetteville, Texas 11 months ago. Declared a suspected custodial kidnapping after a fire burned down the house of his legal guardian, Dr. Eric Thorne, a biomedical engineer with military ties. Dr. Thorne's body had been recovered from the ashes. No trace of Luca. The case had gone cold. Yates stared at the screen. That boy in the hospital was Luca, and the timeline lined up with Atlas's disappearance. But why would a military K-9 and a 2-year-old vanish from the same region, only to appear together almost a year later in rural Ashton? He needed answers. He called the Army contact who confirmed Atlas's background. "I need more than the basics," Yates said. "Who was Atlas assigned to? What operation was going on in Fayetteville last year?" There was a long pause on the line. "Off the record," the man said. Yates nodded. "Of course." There was a black-budget medical facility in Fayetteville, run under a joint military-private partnership. Atlas was one of several K-9s used to guard the perimeter. The operation was classified. Biomedical testing, surveillance. They didn't tell us much, but after the fire, The site was erased. No formal investigation, just wiped clean. And the boy? Yates asked. I don't know, never heard about a kid. Yates hung up, unease crawling through him. He pulled out the photo from the cabin, the baby blanket, the sock, the shredded tactical vest. That cabin hadn't been random. Someone had been hiding Luca and Atlas, someone who had reason to run from the people behind that facility. Elsewhere, the man from the motel was driving fast, dirt kicking behind his tires as he navigated the rural back roads of Ashton. His name was Silas Brent, a former contractor with Black Pine Security, a company often hired to clean up military messes quietly. He didn't care about the dog or the town. He had one mission: find the boy, eliminate all connections. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. His shoulder still ached from the dog's bite. That night in the cabin, he'd thought the storm would drown out the noise. He'd thought he'd ended it, but he hadn't counted on the dog or the boy escaping, or some jogger finding them before the cold finished what he started. He checked his GPS again. The address he'd found in the article, Lena Whitmore, the woman who'd discovered them. She was the thread. If he pulled it hard enough, the whole thing would unravel, and then he'd finish what he started, for good. The knock came just after dusk. Lena Whitmore, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a cup of herbal tea, wasn't expecting anyone. Rain drizzled against her windows again, a steady, familiar tap. She paused her movie and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood outside, soaked in the rain, wearing a delivery jacket and holding what looked like a padded envelope. Lena opened the door an inch, safety chain still latched. "Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly. "Delivery for Lena Whitmore. I didn't order anything. It's prepaid," he said. "I just need a signature." Something in his tone set off a flare of instinct. Lena's eyes flicked to the package. Unmarked. No logo, no label. "I'll pass, thanks," she said, and closed the door. The chain hadn't even clicked before he slammed into it, the old wood creaking under his weight. Lena gasped, stumbling back as the door cracked slightly from the impact. She didn't wait. She grabbed her phone and keys, bolted through the back door, and raced down the alley behind her rental, heart pounding. She didn't know who he was, but she knew that look in his eyes. He wasn't a delivery driver, he was a hunter. At the hospital, Dr. Reeds and Detective Yates were sitting with Luca. For the first time, he was sitting up in bed, cradling the stuffed dog with a shaky kind of trust. "Can you tell me about the dog, Luca?" Reeds asked gently. Luca looked up, hesitating, then whispered, "He saved me. When fire came, he pushed me." "Fire?" Yates asked. Luca nodded slowly. "The men were yelling. Papa said run. I didn't run fast. Atlas stayed. He bit the bad man." Yates leaned forward. "Your papa? Was his name Eric?" Luca nodded again. "Did he work at the lab, Luca?" The boy's small fingers gripped the blanket tighter. "Papa said they wanted to take me. He said I was too special, that they would break me." Reeds exchanged a tense glance with Yates. "What did he mean?" she asked softly. "Why would they want to take you?" "I hear things," Luca whispered, voice like breath on glass. "And I feel, when people lie, I can see it, inside them." Yates stiffened. "See lies?" The child nodded again. "Papa said it's from the medicine. When I was a baby." Yates stood slowly and stepped out into the hallway, pulling out his phone. He called his army contact again. "Eric Thorne, was he part of the biomedical unit?" "Yes," came the answer. "Lead engineer. Worked on cognitive mapping in infants. Experimental neuroserums. Why?" Yates closed his eyes. "Because his son didn't die in that fire." At the animal shelter, Atlas stirred. He sat up sharply, growling low. Diane stood nearby, frozen. "Easy, boy," she said. But Atlas didn't move like a wounded dog. He moved like a soldier, like he was sensing something. And then the shelter's front door shattered. Silas Brent strode in, silenced, pistol drawn. Two volunteers screamed. He ignored them. "Where's the damn dog?" he growled. He moved through the rows quickly, eyes scanning each kennel. Atlas watched him approach. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He waited. As Silas raised the weapon, Atlas lunged. The impact was explosive. Metal bars bending as 80 pounds of trained muscle and fury exploded into him. The gun clattered to the floor. Volunteers ran screaming into the night as Silas crashed back, struggling under Atlas's weight. He reached for his second pistol, but Atlas bit down, hard. Silas screamed. Seconds later, police sirens wailed outside. Silas kicked Atlas off and limped toward the back door, clutching his bleeding arm. But as he fled into the darkness, he hissed one final promise. The boy's mine. He doesn't get to walk away. Back at the hospital, Yates returned to the room, only to find Luca's bed empty. Panic surged. "Where's the child?" He barked. The nurse's eyes widened. He was just here." Lena burst in behind him, soaked and shaking. "Someone tried to grab me at my house." Yates turned toward the window, which was ajar. A small handprint lingered on the glass. Luca was gone. The rain had started again, soaking the pavement, washing away the last traces of Luca's tiny footprints outside the hospital window. Detective Yates cursed under his breath as he sprinted through the parking lot. "He's a child. He couldn't have gotten far." "He's not ordinary," Lena replied, breathless beside him. "You said it yourself. He knows things. Maybe he sensed it. Danger." Yates paused. "Or maybe he didn't run alone. Just..." Then his phone buzzed. It was Diane from the animal shelter. "He came for the dog," she shouted, panic in her voice. "Some man broke in with a gun. Atlas attacked him, but he got away. He kept saying, 'The boy is mine.'" Yates's gut clenched. "He's trying to tie up loose ends." He turned to Lena. "If Atlas knows where Luca is, he'll go after him. We need to follow the dog." An hour later, Atlas was released into Yates's custody with a tracking harness clipped around his chest. As soon as he caught Luca's scent from the boy's blanket, his behavior changed instantly. Nose to the ground, body tense, legs moving with deliberate speed. They followed him out of town, headlights off, along an abandoned farm road cutting through dark hills and heavy brush. The deeper they went, the more isolated the world became. Civilization faded. The only sound was the growl of tires over gravel and the steady patter of rain. "Where's he going?" Lena whispered. Yates tightened his grip on the wheel. "Wherever that boy is." Luca, meanwhile, stood alone in the middle of an open field, barefoot, soaked and shivering. He hadn't known why he ran, only that something inside him screamed that he had to. He had seen shadows in the hospital before the window creaked open. He had seen lies flicker behind calm faces, and worse, he had felt someone getting closer. But now, alone beneath a sky smeared with thunderclouds, his confidence faltered. Tears threatened his eyes. "Atlas," he whispered. Then he heard it, a bark. He turned and saw movement in the trees, swift and sure. Then, out of the dark, Atlas emerged, bounding across the wet grass. Luca dropped to his knees, sobbing with relief, as the dog barreled into him, nuzzling his chest and licking his face. "You found me," he whispered, hugging him tight. Behind them, headlights crested the hill. Yates's truck skidded to a stop, and Lena leapt out, yelling, "Luca!" He turned, unsure, but then ran into her arms, still holding Atlas's collar. "Tight?" Yates scanned the field, gun drawn. "He's near. He wouldn't let the boy go without a chase." He was right. Not 200 yards away, Silas Brent watched through night vision goggles from the tree line, one arm bandaged, the other steadying a scoped rifle. His bleeding wound throbbed with each heartbeat, but he didn't care. This was it. Luca was too dangerous, a living experiment, a product of a serum not even its creators fully understood. His ability to sense lies, to read others, to absorb emotional currents like a living radar. It wasn't natural, it wasn't safe. "Should have finished you the first time," he growled. He steadied the rifle, lining up the shot. One squeeze, that's all it would take. But before his finger could tighten, a growl behind him, low, deep, terrifying. He turned. Another dog. No, 2. Then 3. Their eyes gleamed from the woods. Atlas hadn't been alone in the wild. Somehow, during his year in hiding, he had found other strays. Others like him, trained, abandoned, broken, but not beaten. The dogs lunged. Silas's scream echoed through the valley as the darkness came alive. Back in the field, Luca turned his head sharply toward the trees, as if he'd heard something. No one else did. Then he looked up at Yates. "It's over," he said quietly. Lena held him tighter, as if afraid he might vanish again. And Atlas, panting, wet and loyal, sat at their side, watching the woods, with the calm knowing of a guardian, who had fulfilled his purpose once again. Detective Yates stood in the glow of his truck's headlights, his breath a mist in the chilly night air. Luca, wrapped tightly in Lena's arms, clung to Atlas's wet fur like it was his lifeline, but Yates's mind raced ahead. "This isn't just a missing child case anymore," he said quietly to Lena. "It's something bigger, something dangerous." Lena nodded, eyes wide with fear and determination. What exactly happened to Luca? What kind of medicine did his father give him? Yates looked at the boy, his fragile face, his intense gaze, and then back at the dark woods where Silas had disappeared. "I've been digging into Dr. Eric Thorne's work. Turns out he wasn't just a biomedical engineer. He was part of a secret military project developing neuroenhancement serums, things that could amplify brain function, memory, perception, even empathy." Lena blinked. Empathy? Why? Because, as terrifying as it sounds, they were trying to create soldiers who could feel the intentions of others, detect lies, anticipate moves, almost like precognition. But the project was experimental and dangerous. Eric's son, Luca, was apparently one of the test subjects. Atlas stirred at Luca's feet, alert. The dog's loyalty was unwavering, but Yates wondered if there was something more profound between the two. A bond forged not just by survival, but by shared experience. The next morning, a news alert flashed on Yates's phone. "Breaking: federal authorities launch investigation into Black Pine Security and Classified Medical Research Facility, following new evidence." Yates's heart quickened. This was it. The cardiac exposure of the shadowy program that had tried to bury the truth with fire and silence. Meanwhile, Lena sat beside Luca's hospital bed, reading him a story from a picture book. Luca's eyes sparkled with rare joy as he traced the pictures with his small fingers. "Do you remember anything else about the fire?" Lena asked softly. Luca hesitated, then nodded. "Papa told me the fire wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to keep the serum secret. They said the government would pay any price." Lena's eyes brimmed with tears. "But you survived." Luca smiled faintly. "Because Atlas didn't leave me." Suddenly, the room's peaceful quiet was shattered by the sharp ring of Yates's phone. He answered and listened intently, face tightening. "Where?" he demanded. "Old Black Pines warehouse, outskirts of Fayetteville," came the voice. "Possible evidence linked to the fire and project." Yates exchanged a look with Lena. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. That night, Yates, Lena and Atlas, now fully recovered and ready, drove through winding roads toward the abandoned warehouse. Shadows stretched long beneath the moonlight. Inside the building, flickering lights revealed dust-covered crates stamped with military insignia and labeled Project Oracle. Lena shone her flashlight on a cracked metal box, opening it with a click. Inside lay files, vials of strange green liquid, and a battered journal. Yates flipped through the journal and read aloud. Subject 47. Enhanced sensory perception. Improving lie detection. High risk of psychological side effects. Containment breach anticipated. Lena's breath caught. Subject 47, that's Luca. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty warehouse. Yates raised his gun. From the shadows stepped a woman in a lab coat. Pale, stern, eyes cold as steel. "Detective Yates," she said smoothly. "I see you've found my work," Lena gasped. "Who are you?" The woman smiled thinly. "Dr. Helen Sharp, lead scientist on Project Oracle, and I've been waiting a long time for you to find me." Yates tightened his grip on the gun. "You're responsible for all of this. The fire, the experiments?" Dr. Sharp's expression didn't waver. "Necessary sacrifices for progress. But you don't understand. Luca is the key to something far greater, a new era of human potential. Lena stepped forward, voice fierce. He's a child, not your experiment. Dr. Sharp's eyes flickered. You think you can protect him? They will come for him again, and next time, they won't fail. Atlas growled low, stepping protectively in front of Luca. Yates took a step closer to Dr. Sharp. This ends now. We're taking all this to the authorities. Dr. Sharp's smile faded. You don't know what you're dealing with. The warehouse lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. A tense silence fell, then footsteps, faster, coming closer. Yates raised his gun, ready. Darkness engulfed the warehouse as Yates, Lena, Luca, and Atlas stood frozen, listening intently. The footsteps echoed closer, their owners still unseen. The tension was unbearable. Suddenly, a powerful spotlight snapped on, flooding the space with blinding white light. A squad of armed agents poured into the room, weapons trained on Dr. Sharp and the group. FBI, everyone freeze, barked a commanding voice. Dr. Sharp's confident smirk vanished. She raised her hands slowly, eyes darting around, calculating her next move. Yates lowered his gun, relief washing over him. The agents quickly cuffed Dr. Sharp and began securing the lab's contents. Outside, the rain had stopped. Dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting warm gold across the skyline. Luca sat quietly in Lena's lap, clutching Atlas's collar, the dog's head resting against his chest. News crews swarmed the hospital, eager for details of the incredible rescue and the conspiracy uncovered. But Lena and Yates protected Luca's privacy fiercely, determined to give him the childhood he deserved. Weeks later, the investigation exposed a vast network within the government and military that had sought to weaponize human cognition through experimental serums. Project Oracle was officially shut down. Luca's story became a symbol of resilience, not just a boy who survived a fire or a dog who defended him, but a living testament to the strength of love, loyalty, and the human spirit. Lena and Yates continued to watch over Luca as he adjusted to life beyond shadows and secrets. His unusual gift, his ability to sense lies and feel emotions deeply, remained, but with time and the support of those who cared, it became a source of strength rather than fear. Atlas, now a hero in the community, was adopted by Lena. The Kai. Dog's quiet bravery and fierce loyalty made him a constant guardian, a reminder that even the smallest among us can be warriors. One afternoon, as Luca played in the park with other children, Lena noticed him pause, looking intently at a boy nearby. He smiled gently. "Lies don't stand a chance," he said softly. Lena smiled back, proud and hopeful, because sometimes the truth, no matter how hidden, has a way of finding its light. The end.